we're going to get started. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, and we're delighted to have you here. We do have a few people who are still coming in, but we do want to make sure that ultimately the food doesn't get cold or the drinks get warm at the end of the evening.
Push me out of the way if you don't.
My name is Virginia Roach. I'm Dean of the Graduate School of Education here at Fordham, and we're so happy to be hosting iLead and our partners at Carnegie as you embark on an important meeting here and as our community learns a lot about what you're doing. This evening, we are very proud to co-host this event with the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and iLead. A lot of people say iLead, they don't know what it means. It's Improvement, Leadership, Education, and Development. And if you are from an iLead team across the country, raise your hand. All right, there we go. If you are one of our Carnegie partners, we have a number of people from the foundation. Raise your hand. All right. Thank you for your support. If you are a graduate student here, raise your hand. All right. Here's our future leaders. All right. And finally, last but not least, if you're a member of our Fordham faculty and iLead team, raise your hand. Thank you so much. They brought improvement science to the Graduate School of Education, and we are very grateful for that. I wanted to go over sort of the logistics of the evening because, as one of my former doc students says, I am known to be a drill sergeant and keep us on track. For all of you who are presenting, Delia is in the front row. Delia has the magic cards that say 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then we kind of give you the book. We have a in-person audience, and we have a virtual audience this evening. So we are live streaming this session to this virtual audience. When we have Q&A, our virtual partners will be able to ask questions as well. So keep in mind that we're actually double the size of what you see here because of our virtual audience. We're going to try to keep people very much on time. The idea here is to have 2 panels. Our first panel from our partners at Carnegie, and then a second panel highlighting some of the work that we're doing here in New York. We're going to save the questions for both panels to the end so that we have enough time to really get into a more in-depth discussion. And of course, our hope is that you'll stay. We're going to be here for another hour of fun and fellowship and have an opportunity to really informally continue the conversation that we started through the panels. If you are so interested, our hashtag handles for this evening are hashtag iLead, hashtag Carnegie FDN, and hashtag Fordham GSE. So if you're so inclined, get the news out there. What I'd like to do, again, to keep us on time, is I'm going to introduce all of the speakers and give you a little chance to know a little bit of their background now, so that we can just continue going from one panel to the other. Our first speaker is someone who, in some ways, I feel doesn't need introduction, but I am going to introduce him for those of you who may not know him. It is Dr. Tony Bright, and he's the 9th president. He's the 9th president of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, where he's leading work on transforming educational research and development, more closely joining researchers and practitioners to improve teaching and learning. He formerly held the Spencer Chair in Organizational Studies in the School of Education and the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University from 2004 until he moved on to Carnegie in 2008. He came to Stanford from the University of Chicago, where he was the Marshall Field Fourth Professor of Urban Education and Sociology, and where he developed and founded the Center for Urban School Improvement, which supports reform efforts in Chicago public schools. He also created the Consortium on Chicago School Research, a federation of research groups that have produced a range of studies that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with at this point. He's a member of the National Academy of Education and was appointed by President Obama to the National Board for Educational Sciences in 2010. In 2011, he was elected a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's one of America's most noted researchers. His 1993 book, Catholic Schools and Common Good, is a classic in sociology and education. Of course, we at Fordham are very grateful for that. And he has a deeper interest in bringing scholarship to bear on improving schools. And this is reflected not only in the work that we're doing here today, but in his later volumes, Trust in Schools, Organizing Schools for Improvement, Lessons from Chicago, and Learning to Improve. Much more natural. Thank you. So, Dr. Brick holds a BS from Boston College, another Jesuit institution, I'll just point that out, and from Harvard he received his EDD. Luis Gomez, who has recently returned from a visit to Rome and Pope, just saying, is a professor of education and information studies at the University of California in Los Angeles, and he has served since 2008 as a senior fellow at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. There he leads the network development work that many of you are involved in, and beginning in 2009, he's held the Helen Faison Chair in Urban Education at the University of Pittsburgh, where he was also the director of the Center for Urban Education and a senior scientist at Learning Research and Development Center. From 2001 to 2008, he held a number of faculty appointments at Northwestern University, and prior to joining Academy, he spent 14 years working on cognitive science and person-computer systems and interactions at Bell Laboratories, right in our backyard. Bell Communications Research and Bell Core. His research interests have encompassed the application of computing and networking technology to teaching and learning, applied cognitive science, human-computer interactions, and other areas. He is a son of New York and received his bachelor's degree from State University of New York at Stony Brook in 1974. His degrees, he's got degrees at Berkeley and other places, but Stony Brook was his We will have, after our first panel, a series of 4 panelists after that. The panel will be led by Dr. Margaret Carrior. We know her as Carrior. She's an associate professor here at Fordham in Ed Leadership Administration and Policy Studies Division. She's our program for the EDD and Ed Leadership, and she is also our Associate Division Chair. She teaches courses on improvement science. She has brought improvement science to Fordham. I cannot underscore that enough, and facilitates our iLead work. Previously, she was at Bank Street College of Education, where she directed the Future School Leaders Academy, which is a 2-year dual certification leadership preparation program that partners with over 30 school districts. And in her prior year work, she was an associate professor for ed leadership at Teachers College, Columbia University. She's conducted a great number of regional and national studies over the last 35 years on leadership preparation approaches and school district reform initiatives, and published many books and articles. She has worked on performance assessments for leadership in both the states of Massachusetts and California, and her articles on preparation and her research on preparation have shown the effects of principled preparation on the influence of quality of preparation and effective school leadership. Dr. Robert Chaps, Bob Chaps, as we know him, is in 2019-2020, our current school year, is his 10th year as a superintendent of Amerenik Public Schools here in New York, one of our most prestigious school districts. He comes to Amerenik having served 4 years at another school district close by as the superintendent of Hastings-on-Hudson, and 3 years as the superintendent of Manchester-Essex Regional School District in Manchester-by-the-Sea, Massachusetts. He has extensive experience at the secondary level, having served as a principal of Manchester-Essex Regional School District, Middle High School, and an assistant principal at Londonderry High School in New Hampshire, where he's originally from. During his time in Amerenik, Dr. Shaps has worked tirelessly to provide an extraordinary educational experience for all of the children in the district. During 2018-19, he led the school district's efforts to negotiate a 7-year agreement between the Board of Education, the Teachers Association, and you who are superintendents out there know what a feat that is. He has ongoing and upcoming initiatives on social emotional learning, respect for all, and overall emotional well-being and growth of each individual student in a district. In addition, the district's been closely monitoring their enrollment growth over the past several years in a region of the country that generally sees enrollment declines. And they are thinking strategically about how to increase their enrollment growth within space limitations and how to maintain their excellence in the process. He is grew up in Chicago, even though he's been a New Hampshire live free or die state. Misha Ross Porter is one of our doc students in the EED program. And when she's not doing that, in her other life, she actually is the Bronx Executive Superintendent of Schools, which is no small job, in the New York City Department of Education. She's deeply invested in enriching school leaders' equity lens and building collaborative practices across the schools. Prior to taking the helm at the Bronx as the Bronx Executive Superintendent, she served as a superintendent for Community School District Number 11 and principal of the Bronx School for Law, Government and Justice, LGJ. During her time at LGJ, Misha served as a community coordinator, internship coordinator, and taught English before becoming an assistant principal in 2004. So from 2004 to 2019, she has become the executive superintendent. Even before that, that was last year. She's feeling a little old all of a sudden. She also is a native of New York. She was born in Far Rockaway and raised in Jamaica, Queens. Misha Ross Porter began her life just as her students do. She's a product of New York City Public Schools. She graduated from Queens Vocational and Tech High School and then went on to receive a Bachelor's of English concentrating in cross-cultural literature and Black and Puerto Rican studies at Hunter College. She later received her master's degree in administrative supervision from Mercy College, completed her school district leadership certification, and the New York City Advanced Leadership Institute, and then saw the light and came to Fordham. Andrea Codet, who's sitting right next to her, is Deputy Superintendent of Schools in Yonkers, having served in this role since 2016. Over the last 3 years, she spearheaded several initiatives, including Yonkers Basics, a community-wide parent education initiative for children ages 0 to 3. In her previous position, Dr. Codet served as the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction in K-12 in the East Ramapo Central School District in New York. She began her career in education as a special ed teacher and a building-level mathematics specialist. In her administrative career, she has worked as a district-level mathematics specialist, an early childhood principal, a K-5 principal, and a secondary special education coordinator. She earned her doctorate in executive leadership from Fordham University and her master's in curriculum instruction with reading specialization and educational administration from Pace University here in New York. And she also has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Mercy College. She has lived in 4 different countries throughout her life and on 3 different continents. And in that, she considers herself, as we do, truly a global citizen. So, with that, we're going to launch into our first discussion, and we'll just get right into our discussion, and then we'll move from one level of discussion to the next. And so because of that, I'm going to off this mic. And we'll begin in a different setting. So, just to get us started, Dr. Britt, could you just give our audience, both here and digitally, just a thumbnail sketch about what we mean when we say improvement science?
Well, normally this is a 50-minute lecture. We're told to do it in 3 sentences. There are many different ways to describe this work, but the core of the work basically consists of getting a set of what we think of as the core improvement questions, normative, in the way schools operate and the way networks try to come together to solve complex problems operate. And those three questions are, what's the specific problem I'm trying to solve? And coupled to that, what's the specific aim? What am I trying to accomplish, for whom, by when? Then reminded me, soon is not a time and some is not a number. That's very much captured, because we tend in education to, and in the best sense of the term, embrace very noble aspirations, large, ambitious aims. But getting this down to something we can actually make a difference on sometime or later. So that's the first one. What specifically are we trying to accomplish? The second core question involves what changes are we going to introduce and why these changes? And the second part of that question is in some ways the most important part of the question because it forces us to think causally. Because again, what we tend to see in the field is we have these very broad aspirations, what we would like to see. We have kind of what are immediately compelling change ideas. And one of the things we're constantly in conversations with people about is, well, if you work on this, how do you think this is going to get you to that? And that's why we're introducing the changes we're trying to pursue. And then the third core question is, and how will we know whether those changes are true? We have lots of aspirations and lots of energy around change and very little evidence to challenge us, to push back at us as to whether the changes we're introducing are actually accomplishing what we aim for them to accomplish. How will we know whether those changes are improving? When those three questions are alive inside an organization, the disciplined work of improvement is occurring.
So based on that foundation, let's now turn to the Carnegie Initiative iLead. What is it? What's its main goals? What do you hope to achieve?
In some ways, one of the biggest challenges that the body of work that Tony just talked about needs to push against. We here is that here in our field, we're great at taking stuff up. We have innovations and we get more and more of them. Good ideas come down the pipe all the time. We are not as good as we might be at making good ideas go deep inside of our field and create a set of integrated actors around those ideas to create a subfield. iLead is our attempt to do that. If these ideas are to take root, they can't just take root in the academy. They have to take root across the breadth of our field. And they won't take root across the breadth of our field unless they have meaningful instantiation in the way we prepare the next generation of leaders. And so iLead is meant to embed these ideas in a meaningful way in the fabric of institutions of higher education, colleges of education, and in the fabric of local education agencies, school districts. So, and iLead is meant to do that in both independent ways and lots of partnerships across the country, which many people here are representative, but also in coordinated ways, to do it in a way that all these different partnerships can talk to each other. In your seats, there's this thing that the people who are part of iLead created called the developmental progressions. At their core, they are a language that allow people in different partnerships to talk about the work they do in a way that they all understand and really are. But at base, what we're trying to do in iLead is take a very powerful set of ideas and give them life inside universities and school districts in a coordinated fashion. So together, they can work together on their training and problems that are meaningful to their children.
just want to talk a little bit about how we got engaged with what became iLead. And there are actually multiple routes to it, but the one I want to call out most immediately is another one of the senior fellows at the Carnegie Foundation, David Imig, who's sitting back here, and very much part of iLead. And David had led under my predecessor, Lee Schulman, the work on what's now known as the Carnegie Program on Education Doctrine, which is this doctoral experience pointed toward practice leadership rather than toward academic or scholarly pursuits. And when I connected to see through David, they invited me to some couple of meetings. And one of the things they were talking about in one of the meetings is what should be the culminating project for practice-oriented doctrine, since the thesis is perfectly designed if you're going to be a researcher, because it's your demonstration of being able to conduct rigorous research independently. And so it makes perfect sense as your entry into that line of work. But in a practice-oriented doctoral program, one of the questions I would ask is, well, what do these people do when they leave you? What is it you're preparing them to do? And in various ways, these programs are preparing people to go into positions of some sort of leadership position inside an organization. And if you're doing work inside an organization in some sort of leadership position, what is it that you're supposed to do? And isn't the main work helping this organization get better at doing its core work? That is, helping this organization continuously improve at advancing its organizational aims. And having taught earlier in my career in an administration program, this was way back in my days of the Harvard Grad School of Education, my sense was about it then, and I kept asking questions, that it was still the case that while we did a lot of terrific things in graduate education, in schools of education, we actually didn't teach people how to actually lead improvement, how to bring people together in teams, working on specific problems, and actually advancing improvement on those problems. And so it sort of led to two observations. Shouldn't the act of doing improvement mean take some form of the culminating activity in a doctoral preparation program, practice-oriented doctrine? And then what would you do to actually prepare students to be able to actually do that work? And so that was part of, it would have to be closely tied to actual work occurring in school districts, and it would really require a significant transformation in the preparation programs themselves. And so that was kind of the intellectual history that brought to the iLead work that was introduced.
So you talked about your interest.
You talked about your interest in having iLead really take root and the foundations of where this comes from. In some ways, you're preaching to the choir, right? All of these people in some way have bought into iLead, improvement science, or will as our students. But how, and we use it here at Fordham. I use it myself as a dean, and I find it very helpful. But how do we actually move this out to the non-indoctrinated, the other higher ed institutions? It's a very powerful academy. How do you see that moving?
Well, I'll start. Well, it's a journey, and that journey probably starts with a course of learning who lay the ground. And the thing you're raising is, in some sense, is a conversation that is alive in iLead right now, and we started the conversation like that, I don't know, about a year or more ago, and we will probably continue during this time. And what we're trying to work toward is understanding how the work of the people in this room can become a resource for the people, and not just a resource for the institutions that are part of that. And before one could do that, we have to do what we have done. That is to first show proof of concept, engage in coordinated work, both in individual partnerships and cross partnerships. And you have to say, well, we know enough now so that the onboarding, if you will, of new partners can be accelerated over what's a different people who are applicators. So, I mean, so the first thing to say is, this for us is a live conversation, because the future of iLead and these ideas and how they go other places is something we have to together construct. And the second is that I think we have convinced ourselves that we have worked to this point on something that is shareable. And we have people who are not part of iLead communicating with us saying, well, how do we get to be a part of iLead? So there's at least some affirmation from the field at large that there's something here that we might like to learn about. So, and a very personal one, right? At UCLA, when we started this work, I tried to introduce my colleagues to this work as we should do this as an institution. And basically, they said, your rules are busy with just right now. But now they cycle back and say, what about this thing you're doing with iLead? What are you working on and why is that important? And for me, that's evidence that the field generated that work for them to come back and ask. Because I didn't sort of go say, you really don't pay attention this time. They came back to me saying, well, tell me what you're working on.
And I very much see this as, this isn't a project. Like you do something 3 or 4 years and you want to do something else. This is actually a field building endeavor. You might call it a movement. When we started this work, actually what preceded iLead, is we began often when something new starts in the field, a number of different people in different places start to pick it up, and they're independent, and you don't even know they exist. And then we started hearing about, well, this faculty member is doing an improvement science course over there, and this one's doing something over there, and so Carnegie convened. So we started to bring people together around this. And actually, Lewis was involved. This initially was called the Higher Education Network, which were a group of faculty who we had found or found us, who were at the very earliest stages of bringing this work into their schools of education. The iLead work has resulted in this common language framework for developmental progressions. In this field building work more generally, we began 2 years ago an Improvement Scholars Network, which overlaps with iLead. So many of the number of the faculty who are part of iLead are part of this Improvement Scholars Network. How we legitimate this work as scholarship in the academy. So that's a key piece of the field building. And then we also want to recognize that a key piece of building the field is bringing together the professional practitioners who demonstrated they know how to do this kind of work. They would be the equivalent of your national board certified leaders of improvement in organizations. That's bringing that community together is something that we're now initiating. This is a long-term transformation where we're putting down roots in a number of different places to build a field.
Could we just elaborate a little bit more on that? You talked about your vision, coming to higher ed, and then you started to turn the corner a little bit to the local education agencies. So you see some sprouts, if I may use the word term there. Why do you think they're picking this up? What do you think is in? What are they getting? And where is it?
Well, I mean, sometimes, for ideas to get picked up broadly, it's often all about timing. I think let me say this, back 4 or 5 years, we'd come to the end of one big reform era, which was accountability-oriented reform based largely on value-added test scores for schools and teachers. And there were some real positive things that accrued from that, including a lot more attention to data, a lot more attention to persistent disparities and outcomes. A lot of good things that came with it. But we had also seen it kind of like you come to the limit of what this could do. And then question is, well, what do we do next? And there's also a sense that, well, we can try new things. Districts might go out and say, we're going to do iPads for every teacher. It's like, I get this hot change idea, and we got this aspiration, and how is that going to accomplish this? And so this feeling, that sense was right for these notions about how do we continuously get better at what we do. And so long as we, and some of the problems that we seek to solve are extraordinarily complex, too complex for typically any individual school or even many districts to solve on their own. And the emergence of these ideas, largely spawned by the web, the internet, of network-based science. Well, education is the quintessential large network. There are millions of people doing highly related work every day. And as an educator, I think as a teacher, any problem that I might be confronting, chances are there's somebody out there somewhere who's been working on this, who's figured out something that I could build on. I just don't know who they are and what they've learned. So we have this great untapped resource of operating in structured networks. And those ideas are very compelling. When you start talking about them in these ways, we did our first improvement summit 7 years ago. It was like this, we're going to invest all this money on this summit. I'm signing my name on agreements for hotel contracts, and God, if I have to go to the board and tell them I just spent $300,000, I have no way to pay for this. But it was really a kind of story of, well, if we build it, will they come? And we people show us this year we'll have close to 2,000. But it is spreading in a very organic way. And it just says these ways of thinking and acting in the world are really compelling once you start to get a grasp.
I guess I'd add here, talking about oftentimes in these worlds where universities and school districts interact, there's an implied power differential. We didn't talk about what that is. There's a first one.
Louis, could you pull that mic up just a little bit more?
I'm sorry. Oftentimes when universities and school districts interact, there's a power differential. And universities hold some of the more cards, let me say. And one of the things that has happened with this work in this arrangement, what we call iLead, really I think is about the work that agency, the ability to do, is more evenly spread. In this work, and our colleagues around the room will say, will affirm about that we have lots of cases where professors come to school leaders and say, how do I do this? And so both the acquisition of agency and conferring agency is more evenly distributed. And I think it all has to do with the power of the ideas. And the ideas provide agency across roles in a way that other things that have come to the table just simply do not. So I think the corner gets turned because the ideas are powerful, A, and the ideas lead to a kind of peerage across roles that there aren't a huge number of examples in the field happening.
It's interesting, you're almost describing between the two of you first an epistemological shift that then turns into an organizational and social relationship shift, which is powerful. What I'd like to do is now actually have us turn the corner and invite our district partners and our school team to come up and say, okay, you've heard it from the core central piece, now how is this working out in the world?
You see the adoption of this, kind of like how Rogers talked about the diffusion of innovation. We're still at the elevator stage, right?
Okay, I think what we're going to do is we'll actually have people pass the mics back and forth. I'm not sure. Can you tap your mics and see what? Yeah, that one's on.
That one's on.
Andrea, is your mic on? Okay, great. Okay. So we're going to now turn the corner and talk a little bit about, okay, now we go to improvement science down in the world. You will see that you have discussion questions for this group that are actually in your programs. I mean, we're basically asking our panelists now, how is your district using improvement science and promoting its use among central office staff and school leaders? What infrastructures are needed to do that? And how is the iLead partnership supporting your work? And what do aspiring and new leaders need to know in order to be effective in using improvement science? We've asked each of you to talk for about 5 minutes, and again, Delia's right in front of you, so she'll help keep us on track. But just to get us started, Terry, could you briefly just give an overview of the work here for those in the audience who might not be familiar with it?
Yes, and let me say, Fordham University got involved in the iLead work because of the invitation from the Carnegie Foundation to join in this effort. And they asked us to partner with one or more local districts. Of course, being New York, we had to partner with many. But at Fordham, we've done a lot of work with districts over the years, and what we realized is often it was a rather transactional relationship built around contracts, grants, and so forth. And we really wanted to start off as a mutual learning between us and the districts. So we invited superintendents from now 3 districts, because Misha's consolidated the Bronx, but from initially 4 districts, to think along with us. And we really took the question that Carnegie posed to us seriously, which is, how do you develop leaders and support them to use improvement science for continuous school improvement? And we took that question to heart and really grappled with it. And the first outcome of that was to redesign our EDD program, which is now, our portion is in our 2nd year. And would you all raise your hands, those of you who are in the program? We've got several people who are now learning right along with us. But we really had our partners work with us on thinking through what this would be, from the ground up, about using improvement science. The second is we wanted to document the improvement science work they were already doing in their districts, and they will each mention it. And then third, we wanted to be sure that the learning we gained didn't accrue just to Fordham, but would also accrue to them, and have been piloting efforts to do leadership development work in the districts to try to learn, how do you develop and support leaders in the work of doing improvement science while they're leading schools and trying to make a difference. And then finally, we want to think more deeply about how do we turn this not into a series of learning experiences, but into sustained work that we do in the districts. How does this go from being a pilot of working with a group of principals or a group of assistant principals to something that is sustained and can be replicated more broadly? And that's the question we're grappling with now.
So, Misha, you want to talk about this effort from your perspective?
So when I started this effort, I didn't know I was designing tasks that I would actually have to do. They were really cool until they became mine. But so there are really 3 things I'm really proud of in terms of the partnership. So first, continuing in District 11, the district that I led before taking on this role, we're working in 4 middle schools, identifying a problem of the week, and assistant principals are working together around common assessments and how specific strategies in those classrooms across 4 schools are having impact. And one of the things that they've discovered in this process is that the first problem is really about teachers letting go, which is our common problem, and allow students to engage in productive struggle. The second is my team over here, the Bronx Academic Response Team. And so our system has built a structure that relies on improvement science as part of its cycle of improvement. And so the academic response team works with schools that are on the cusp of if we do this thing, it'll move us to the next level. And typically schools don't know what that thing is. And so the team works with them in a cycle, first really just getting to know the school, building a sense of trust, and helping to identify a small problem that they can help the school to solve. But it's not just about the solving of the problem, it's about the process of problem solving. And so I'm really proud of the work that team is doing. And, to Dr. Brick's point, we often say the answer is in the room, but we never figure out what that answer is. And so their work is really about figuring out what that answer is. And then the last thing that, since I have to do homework, other people do too, we partnered around creating a cohort, an EDD cohort for the Bronx. And if you are not from New York City, the Bronx is the most amazing borough to work in, but it also is the borough with the highest levels of everything, the highest levels of poverty, the highest levels of students with disabilities, the most amazing children and school leaders that you've ever met, the hardest working teachers, and so it's often the forgotten borough. And so what we're investing in together in partnership is creating an EDD cohort that is for Bronx leaders who are interested in solving a Bronx problem. And so to the point of how do you institutionalize and deepen that work, their work is in identifying a problem as part of their study. And for us, there's two things that happen. One, we're building a process that's looking at problems that affect our borough, but we're also building a different level of leadership, right? A smarter base of leaders who have a different type of toolkit. And so I'm really excited about that. And then I'm somebody to study with, create study groups for myself and all that good stuff.
Bob?
Sure. So we began the foray into improvement science in a very focused way. We actually started with our aspirational goal. We as a district have long focused on literacy, promoting literacy, and so as a system, we put it out there to our community that all students would read capably and voluminously across all genres for meaningful purposes. So it's a big idea. But we quickly realized that improvement science allowed us to take what I would say is the complexity of an aspirational goal and really bring it into focus in very small bites. And it's led us to do two things, to slow down and slow the work down. One of the things I was listening to our guest speakers is that idea that by slowing down, you can start to really focus in and prioritize the direction you want to go. But also at the same time, realize the complexity of our work. And I think those are the two things that are important to us. So by taking that aspirational goal and focusing on three things, access, volume, and choice, we then start to say, what is our aim? What do we want to change and why? And to speak to those three questions, how would we measure and know if it's working? And it was interesting because partway through the iLead experience, I remember sitting out in California, and the idea of metrics or measurement is something that you think is daunting because we measure everything. But the scale of that measurement is something that I've realized through our work, that a small measure, may lead you to think big and differently and move forward in this process. And so I would say is in the Marinic, our principles really are focusing on this aspirational goal, but applying improvement science on a day-to-day basis in not only our thinking, but in our doing and how we measure our progress. And it's led to some really interesting, what I would say, paths that we couldn't imagine when we started the work. It's really organically led to the use of creating assessment tools that make sense relative to where we think we're going next. And to me, I would say that's what I appreciate about this. I also want to say that through this partnership in terms of infrastructure and supports, I am a student of Lee Shulman, and I think the tension between the academy, right, and the practice is always there. And so as much as we can help our new leaders and emerging leaders, understand how do I take from the academy and use it as a resource, but apply it in very practical terms as well. So we're really moving the needle relative to performance. And so for us, it's been exciting, and certainly it's been rewarding relative to small increments of measurable time and taking that one thing.
Andrea?
Yes, hi, good evening. So in Yonkers, we took sort of a bifurcated approach. Our first approach to improvement science was really starting small. I was charged by the superintendent with an early childhood, you don't want to call it initiative, movement, really to look at school readiness. And we had heard anecdotally that our students were not coming in ready to learn. We knew from measuring that we had a high number of referrals of students, even at the early childhood level, to special education. We had, we were seeing an uptick in suspensions of young students. And we saw a lot of atypical responses to what we would consider to be a typical stimulus, like come and sit on the carpet, right? And students were having, some challenges with following those directives. So our superintendent had actually interacted with Dr. Ronald Ferguson from the Boston Basics. He's done a lot of work on closing the achievement gap, but mostly for older students. But one thing in their research, they found that students as young as 2 years old, that the achievement gap does actually appear. So we tackled that problem through Yonkers Basics. We wanted to start at the beginning with the end in mind, but knowing that the end is not just graduation, and right now it's college, career, and civic readiness. We don't just want to graduate. We are proud of our graduation rate. It's at 88%. But are students persisting through college, and are they leading good lives as global citizens? So that is something that we started tackling. And concurrently now, we actually have started our principal PLCs. So I have 6 principals that I meet with monthly in a professional learning community. So that is another place where we are infusing improvement science. We want our principals to engage in this continuous cycle of improvement, and we want it to be replicable. We have pockets of excellence in Yonkers, especially at the elementary level, but it's not distributed across the district. We want to get better faster, as Dr. Pike said, get better faster at continuous improvement. So we are on our journey of improvement science. We actually have one of our principals here who's also a student in Fordham. And we have several other members of Yonkers or affiliated with Yonkers in some way, and I'm happy they're here. This is not just flash in the pan. This is practice, right? So we have to embed what we do in our practice, and that's what we hope to do in Yonkers.
So based on what you've heard your colleagues say, Terry, do you have a couple of minutes of response, and we'll go back through?
I guess one of the things that's been wonderful for us is that we've been learning together. And even though we're each trying out improvement science in different venues, different kinds of districts and different kinds of institutions, it's been wonderful to kind of bring the question together to think about how do we move this forward. And so for us as faculty and trying to design this work, it's been really great to have to observe what they're doing, to learn from it, to get examples that they're bringing to our own coursework, but also to have them give us a critique of how we're doing what we're doing so that we can do it better, make better assignments. and really, just as an aside, what we've been able to do is really, but really ground all the coursework in the work of the School of Improvement, so that there are no work assignments. All of it's about the current problems and they experience throughout the program. Because we want everything to be tools and classes that they can for us, we also try to take advantage of serendipity. There's opportunities that come up where we say, hey, let's work with this and take advantage of it. So when Andrea started the Yonkers 36, let's look at it as improvement science, not just how do you distribute it, but also how do you do that measurement as part of that.
So I think one of the things that, putting on my candidate hat, right, the hardest thing to do is to identify the problem that you want to solve. And to get from this space, like Robert described, to let me start here. And I think one of the things that I'm also really proud of is that in New York City, we've created a system levels answer, right? Through the creation of the academic response team. It's not just a Bronx thing, it's not Nisha's idea, it's actually a vision of our chancellor and our first deputy chancellor. And so when the system responds, and I tell this funny story, when I first started working with the iLead team, I was like, improvement science, wait, the framework for great schools that leads our work in New York City is rooted in improvement science, yet we never talk about it as a process. And so I was really intrigued in this conversation because I'm like, we've been talking around this without talking about the strategy towards moving it. So that was really exciting to now be in this place as a systems level leader, and to have the system respond in such a way that it says we have to create this function of the system to do what we designed it to do. And through this partnership, honestly, I don't know if I would have made those two connections absent this partnership. I probably would have thought of those two things separately. So I think, really as a system coming up, not just with a strategy or an approach, but the process by which that approach lives in your work. And I want to also shout out our Chief Academic Officer is here, Linda Chen, we spent the day thinking about like how do we go really deep in our work and how do we ensure what we're doing up here is actually having impact in the classroom. Because we stay up here too long. And we stay up here in a space of trying to figure out the solution. And by the time we figure out the solution, there's a teacher in the South Bronx that already solved the problem 2 years ago. But we never talked to that teacher.
Yeah, so I would say the partnership, first of all, I applaud Fordham for really diving in full steam to taking the doctoral program and really aligning it to the principles of improvement science. Second, our group, meeting regularly, able to kind of work together in very diverse settings, but really validate in many respects why the programs for graduate leaders really need to look like this and feel like this in many respects. And so I would say that this network has worked well to that, to validate in many different ways. Finally, I would say that this process has allowed in some ways for us to see the archetype of a leader, what leaders need to know and do, is rooted in improvement science. And so it's a very natural transition to kind of take these principles and then demonstrate and show in many different ways what this work looks like at the building level. And I think for us as a system, that's what's worked well in terms of central office and our building leaders, in terms of how we frame our work and how we certainly embed improvement science in the
So from the perspective of a large district, Yonkers is the fourth largest district in New York State. So it's the largest district in Westchester County. So often we have this in large districts, we are challenged with really improving quickly, but we have so many schools and so many children and so many principals and families that in education and education as general, we tend to grasp at things, right? Oh, you're teaching Go Math, I want Go Math because that will improve my scores, or you're doing this. And there's an adage that says, a drowning man will clutch at straws. So we are not drowning, right? We are educators. We are built to do this work. So I think our partnership has helped us focus ourselves. What are the questions that we need to ask? I'm a fan of the Socratic seminar, right? You keep asking questions, keep going deeper. And it has helped us say, okay, if this is our theory of action, if we do this, then we expect these results, then what is our cycle of improvement that we need to put in? And really bringing it back to that theory of action. And I think that it forces us to be disciplined, because too often we go from one initiative to another. It's like initiative-itis or solutionitis, right? And I think what the partnership has done is helped us have conversations with each other, right? And not be afraid to say, you know what, I'm not sure about this. Who's doing this in this? Can I call somebody up and say, what are you doing with this? So it has helped us just be more collaborative, but helped us think deeper. And we talk a lot about using research-based, instructional or improvements. But when we are in a clutch position, we usually do not go to research. We just go to status quo, right? And Einstein said, insanity, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So we have to really sort of retrain ourselves to say, if I'm in a clutch position, it's not that I'm going to grab at everything. It's really I'm going to get very still and ask the question, what is it? What is the problem, right? How do I know? And how will I go about solving it? How will I know when I have solved it? I think that partnership has allowed us to slow down a little and really ask the deep questions.
So based on that, what I'd like to do is have everybody get real cozy here, because we're going to bring our first two speakers back up, and we're going to let them sit too, so they get chairs.
He's awake. Yes, sir.
And I'm going to encourage you all to, as you speak, the mics are working, just move them a little closer to your face. And now it's the time that we've all been waiting for our question and answer period. So we have a mic on that side of the room, and we've got a mic on this side of the room. So what we would ask you to do is to raise your hand. We'll indicate a mic will come over. And before you ask your question, if you could please identify yourself and your role. And if there's a particular person you want the question directed to, please indicate that as well. So with that.
Thank you very much for a fascinating panel. This is mostly for the LEA folks in the room. I'm wondering, a number of you described creating, I'm David Eddy Spicer, University of Virginia, iLead partnership with Chesterfield County in Virginia. And a number of you described opening the space to slow down. Andrea just said, Socratic method, asking the questions. How do you open that space and keep it open? And how do you ensure that it's open for people like assistant principals who are typically too busy to think about those questions?
I think my initial response is to say you need to prioritize this work. And certainly from the central office to reinforce that ability to say less is more from the point of view of really staying true to these guiding principles and initiative over time, and have the wherewithal to kind of commit to the work. So I think and I would say in the near term, by seeing the energy that comes from this process and the result really builds and allows you to go deeper. So you bring people into this process. It's opened doors that we didn't imagine to our work, and has allowed more people in to be a part of it, to take ownership of the work. So I would say, for us, it's been a natural process of kind of keeping out the things that don't matter, and staying true to what we see as making a difference for what we want to accomplish.
And I would add, just being real about where you are in the work, and where you have space to open those doors, right? So if you have a school on a list, right, we all have those lists that somebody's coming, a man's coming to get to school, right? Women don't come get to school, we just clean it up. But you have to be aware of where you have the space. And so as a system, we identify where we had the space to do these cycles of work, and where were the questions that we wanted to answer. And so we have to be realistic, right? Like there are some places where we don't have the autonomy to slow down, but there are spaces where we absolutely do. And honoring that space and creating a structure for that is really important.
And I would say that we had started with professional learning communities several years ago. However, this year our superintendent wanted our professional learning communities with our principals to be much smaller. So we created smaller PLCs. And we have a structure, we have a text that we do read that's related to improvement. And we have a problem of practice that we examine. And we also have, so we do a book presentation, problem of practice, but then we have a section where the principals can talk to each other about where we are in the phase of improvement. And at first it was a very awkward sort of sharing, and I think that we had to sort of massage the process. And the last set of feedback we got was the principals actually wanted the majority of the time to actually have the conversations about improvement. So we did end up building in some time for many teachers. Our many teachers became much smaller, and then the time for our principals to have the conversation around improvement actually will take up most of our time together, but knowing that you have to have a structure, and it has to be structured conversation. It's not just, oh, what did you do here, what did you do here? You really have to be focused in it. And I think our principals are at the point, at least in the PLC, that Terry and I work in, that they're at that point where we're seeing some really good movement. And if you're here tomorrow, you'll learn more about it in the consultants.
Other questions?
Good evening, folks. Thank you. Sigmund Rex from the University of Maryland, iLead partner along with Prince George's County Public Schools. Quick comment and then a question about the role of higher education in this process and what iLead has really done for us at the University of Maryland. Not only has it enriched our capacity to deliver the kind of high-quality educational leadership programs that schools need, but we've really transformed the role of faculty not only to be teachers in the course, but to be part of the continuous improvement work in school districts, working directly inside these network communities, helping to measure change and spread and scale good ideas. And so that's been really powerful for us. So my question, kind of on both sides of the table, from schools and from school district, what recommendations do you have about how you really can enrich that partnership so that both school districts and colleges are more integrated in one another's daily work?
No, I don't want to. The only thing I would say is it begins with inviting higher ed and having a focus that you're working on as a system that allows a critical friends approach to engage in the work. In our case, we've been working at Summer Slide and replicating Allenton's work for multiple years. We've been building kind of a case for action and purpose and measuring that, and it was the timing of Fordham coming in to kind of examine our work and posing certain courses of action over a period of time that allowed us to strengthen and go deeper into our work as well. So So anchoring it in the work that already exists to finding an entry point as a critical friends and seeing the partnership grow.
And
Oh, I was going to add that for the faculty, I mean, there has to be incentives for faculty. And for faculty, they need to come at this work with the questions in mind as well. And are wondering about, and as for me and my colleagues over here, is that we are wondering about how do you do this? And that becomes our area of research about how do you actually either through our doctoral programs, through the PLCs, through the work that we're doing in small groups. It's like, how do you do this in a way that helps develop capacity? And then we document it ourselves as an area of inquiry. But you have to have faculty that are interested and motivated in those questions.
I was just gonna add that we have to build equal investment.
Right, and I did want to add, it's just a way of looking at higher ed a little differently, looking at them not as people who are coming to write a grant with us and bring money to us, but looking at a higher ed as a partnership that will help us build sustainable structures. So in the past, I know a lot of school districts, their partnership revolved around money, right? The higher ed got money from a foundation, they had to partner with a school district, we partnered, we did the work, higher ed stepped out, and guess what? There was nothing sustained, so then we ended up doing the work. So you end up doing the same work over and over, and I think we also have to look at our partnership a little differently in order for the work to be sustained.
One of the ideas that this is very much still in an early development stage inside of iLead, is in shaping the questions that students work on as part of their doctoral preparation program. And in going back to my early years, I was on a faculty administration program, Harvard Grad School of Education. But just before I left, I had 20 doctoral students that they were in different stages, but I'm supposed to be mentoring them. And everybody's supposedly doing their own project. Well, so they're all bringing their own idea about what they want to study. And there's no way that any one faculty member could possibly mentor 20 different projects. And it was like, but they got to do this, kind of like punch their ticket to get their doctorate. And they produced these things they would write. And probably 3 people would read them. And it would, may not even go on a shelf. Maybe. But this was an enormous amount of human activity that wasn't actually culminating in significant improvement out in school districts. So what if, so it's kind of like you see this long enough, you think, well, let's be organized it. What if in these partnerships, the districts identify 2 or 3 pressing questions that are on the district's mind, like I just remember about we're really trying to get the summer slide. Right? So, and the districts are sending their students into the preparation program. So why couldn't students do their improvement work organized around what are current priorities, improvement priorities identified in districts? Rather than everybody doing it in isolation alone, you could have teams working on the same problem. If you're a faculty member, you could actually, in coaching teams, you can actually start to line up faculty expertise with the problem. And because you've got multiple replicates going on, we might actually learn something that actually improve things in some place. And from the academic side, this also could be publishing. So if you started to think about a different way in which that activity got organized, it could be a win from every side around. And it really starts with, there's a lot of human activity here, and it's not really productive from the point of view of any of the participants. Could we think about a better way to do this?
I'll just add that in response to Sabrina's question, the work that you folks do in Maryland, the work that other people in the island partnership, like our colleagues in Chicago, coupled with the kind of comments that Tony just gave us, is a recognition that we don't really have two organizations that are working on two tracks to prepare the next generation of leaders. What we have in your work, and other people's work in this room, is that we have one stretched organization that shares responsibility. And one way to make the stretching come alive is projects that we share. Another way to make the stretching come alive is to have real data sharing arrangements, not fictive data sharing. Another way to make the stretching come alive is to have people that do work you share. And so I think that part of the secret sauce of the work of iLead is breathing new kind of life into the act of sharing. And it really isn't IHEs and LEAs as two trains running, but one train running together.
Any questions?
There's a train of the conversation here that's just kind of catching my ear, and starting with Eddie Spicer's comment. I'm really impressed that what we have is leaders who are saying, in effect, we don't have to make room for this apart from the real work, because this is the work that needs to be done. And that's where higher ed and school districts can honestly come together, I think. That by asking the question, what is the work that needs to be done? And it's not very difficult to get an agreement that the work that needs to be done is getting better at what we're doing in schools, right? But then if we don't get better at that systematically in a disciplined way, we know what the results will be, because we've been getting those results for the last 50 years. And so to me, what's most appealing about this is it offers us the tools and the structures and the protocols to be able to figure out what it really means to get disciplined about getting better. So when we say something like, it's not that this gets in the way of the work, this is the work. It means that we've got some tools to do that work. Because absent those tools, it's just a lot of good intentions about partnering. And we've seen that for a long, long time.
So for our college, can you just say who you are and what you do?
Yeah. I'm Steve Tozer, and I'm a Carnegie Senior Fellow, and I'm retired from the University of Illinois Chicago, and my colleagues are carrying on this phenomenal work here in Chicago Public Schools and University of Illinois Chicago.
We have time for about one more question.
Hi, my name is Sasha, and I'm from Teachers College, and I'm totally new to iLead and this program. And I noticed that a lot of here is about leadership program, and leadership at superintendent level or school building level. I'm curious to hear from the participant what's the role of the teachers and what's the role of the teacher education programs here at Fordham. How does iLead affect teacher education program here, or how iLead affects teachers in your district?
So we're talking from our positions, but in fact the work is in classrooms and in schools with teachers. The work that I described in District 11 with the 4 schools, teachers are enacting those problems with students. Teachers are data collectors, and so they are working in partnership with their assistant principals in the cycles of inquiry. The academic response team is working in classrooms with teacher teams, and so we are describing the work from the seat that we sit in, but in fact, and this was so important that everything we do, I think about our day today, Linda and Mitza, it's so important that we think about our work and we go to classrooms and see how our work is lived. And so, again, we talk about it from our seat, but in fact, the work that we are studying, the work that we are learning from, the work that we are watching is work that teachers are enacting in classrooms in partnership with us in schools.
Just to add to that, our initiative around this year, the glue was coming up with the idea that establishing a literacy and math or whisper position was the be-all, end-all to the work now that has gone into different layers. So our focus was the unit of the classroom down to the student, but it's all about what the teachers do and how they interact with central office and the leaders. That's the thing.
And our PLC started with teachers, and actually they're still taking place. We do have a partnership with another university, that should be named. But two of our esteemed leaders actually came from that university or education.
Not your superintendent.
But so the teachers are coalescing around the improvement work, learning about cycles of inquiry and fishboning, cause and effect, and logic models and theories of action, and then they're going to enact it, as Nisha said, or enacting it in the class. I guess just the challenge is, how do we make this our practice, right? As not something that is done to someone, but it's done with someone. So that is our ongoing challenge.
And what we bring into the work that we do, both in coursework, but also in supporting the development of leaders, is that question of how do they engage teachers in doing this work. So it's not just that they're doing it in isolation, but how can they do it in collaboration so that the continuous inquiry becomes the practice of the school, whatever that calls it.
I think the deepest answer to your question is that this belongs in the basic preparation of teachers as well as in the professional preparation of leaders. At the foundation side, we made a tactical decision that the wedge into the college education from the professional education side seemed to be somewhat easier wedge, focusing on leadership preparation initially than teacher preparation. But as you see this work unfold out in schools, you tend to bump up against some of these tacit understandings that educators carry around in their heads, and it starts way back in teacher preparation programs. These things are changing and they're improving, but for the longest period of time, the culminating task in a teacher preparation program was to go invent a unit of instruction and go out and teach it. Think about what it says about the nature of professional knowledge in education. Essentially it says, we know nothing. You need to go invent it yourself. Well, that norm about everybody has to solve every problem on their own is very deep-seated in the profession, and it starts way back in teacher education. So the work in leadership I think about as a tactical wedge into more generally the question about how do we better prepare professional educators.
Thank you. And on that note, would you please thank our panelists?